something? Oh, you just started recording. I got you. Okay.
We got it.
Perfect.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Enabling Tech in Action Speaker Series. Today, we have Patrick Lane from Tech First Shift. He's the education manager there. He's going to be talking about monitoring privacy concerns, the HCBS Final Rule, implications for your Human Rights Committee, all sorts of stuff wrapped up into what Patrick's going to be talking about today. So we're going to turn it over to him in a moment. And I also wanted to welcome Caitlin Daigle from Angel Sense. They're going to be doing the vendor spotlight today. So about 45 minutes after the hour, we're going to turn it over to Caitlin for that. And then just some administrative items. Please make sure you stay on mute throughout, unless you want to raise your hand and ask a question. The other opportunity to ask a question is pop a note in the chat, and I'll moderate that and make sure we get the questions to our presenters today. So, Patrick, I'd like to turn it over to you.
All right, Paul, I'm going to take the screen share, if that's all right. And the conversation began about privacy and monitoring and human rights and Human Rights Committee, but it really is a sort of a bigger conversation. I'm not going to go into depth on anything, but I do want to give sort of this overview of, some of the concerns that go with enabling technology, and to give a little bit of my background. My background is in the person-centered practices world. I've been working in that probably, almost 14 years. Lots of concerns about that. Initially, when I heard about enabling technology, I need to tell you, I was at a conference, I talked to someone, and I had some reservations. I had some real concerns, and they mostly centered around the idea of privacy. And then when I had more conversations, again, I was hesitant. As I got to know Shift and the intentionality of what Shift was trying to do to make sure that we're using best practices, they are consistent with HCBS Final Rule and things like that. Not only did I become more comfortable with it, I became an advocate of it. And the reason I became an advocate primarily of enabling technology was because I saw that, and I saw it in action as the quickest way to get people to those person-centered outcomes. Those person-centered outcomes of Shift being, and really it's how we used to define or describe enabling technology. I need less help from other people to do things, and I make more of my own decisions, which is completely consistent and in fact reflects the best practices of HCBS Final Rule. So I want to talk about enabling tech, the final rule on person-centered practices. For a lot of you, this is going to be redundant. Please forgive me, but I will tell you that there, even some of the first years I was going through learning more about person-centeredness, learning more about HCBS Final Rule, I was using a lot of terminology that I didn't understand, that I wasn't really, well versed on, and so there's always room to learn and grow. And I hope that I do hope that you can find something valuable, even if you're quite familiar with this. I want to talk about the final 10 requirements of the final rule. Now, if you're familiar with HCBS Final Rule, you may look into this. I'm going to give you a resource. I'm not going to break these down. We don't have time. I'm going to highlight a few of them, but I'm not going to break this down. But I'm going to give you what I think is an outstanding resource in really understanding what this basically is about. So the 10 requirements: you have access to your community. And what we're thinking about when we think about the right to, what we mean by that, the right to is that on par with a typical adult about your age. That's what we're really looking for when we think about final rule. So people have access, right to the access to the community. We want them to be able to access the community just like anybody else would who doesn't have a diagnosis or isn't receiving services or supports. Choice of setting. How many of you have been in a situation, or you've seen somebody lived in a place? This could be residential, could be community and otherwise, but this is just one example where they lived in a place based upon their disability. The wheelchair house. You guys have seen that, or the house on Behavior Hill. That's one of the jokes that we use on the inside. Well, that could be an example. Also, you think about settings for employment and things like that. The right to privacy, and this is the big one. This is the big one because you have the right to privacy here. And if you look at, you've got privacy at home. So privacy in your community, privacy at home. And that's the point where I'm going to diverge for just a moment and highlight those things. I'm not going to share any great revelation here. I'm not going to give you this huge amount of training on that and what that looks like and what it doesn't look like. What I am going to strongly encourage you to do is work very closely with your Human Rights Committee at your organization or at your state or at your region. I'm not sure how Arkansas does that. Every state does it a little bit differently, but you want to be in touch and you want to be in contact to understand what we mean by meaningful consent. That is that, and this really, if you think about this, not in terms of paperwork and legalese and language like that, really you're thinking about this, how you want to do this in your own life. How many of you are like me and you have a camera inside your home for security purposes? You turn it, it comes on when you leave, it goes off when you're there. You have some control over that. If you do, I've got the Simply Safe. When I leave, my camera comes on. I can monitor the inside of my house anytime I want to. I can check on things like that. But I also know that by default, when I'm home, I'm going to probably turn that thing off because, and the idea is not that you should turn it off when people are home and turn it on when people leave. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that I have some control over that. I have consented to that. There's meaningful consent that's going on with that. A Ring doorbell, motion sensors, monitors. When you're thinking about access at home and privacy there, work closely with the person. It's always about negotiating. It's always about working, and then also work closely with your human rights committee. That also is going to apply when you're thinking about privacy in your community. How many of you have somebody that you have given access to your location? An Apple, like with Find My Friends or whatever that, as Megan, I see you nodding your head, Brad. But I don't open that up to everybody, right? I don't give that to just anybody. So that's somebody, again, I've got some consent. I've meaningfully negotiated that. I have some other people. In fact, I kind of want that. So I don't want you to give the idea that having someone's GPS location is a bad thing, or having a camera in the home is a bad thing. I'm not suggesting that. What we are suggesting is that we're thoughtful in how we apply that. We do that in a way that's consistent with HCBS expectations. It's also consistent with your human rights folks. And we don't just get this sort of tacit consent. We're really working together. I'll talk more about least restrictive environment in just a moment. Those are the two big risks that I initially saw with enabling technology, but I believe they are thoroughly addressed. And let me chase that rabbit just a little bit further. I may get ahead of myself here. One of the things that became apparent to me was that a camera or a motion sensor in the home are tracking someone with their consent, we're working together on this. We've agreed to this. I actually want this because I appreciate the value of safety that it brings with it. That more often than not is less intrusive than having someone in your home on the sofa next door or following you, having to, take you wherever you go. How many of you would love to have a staff person, quote, staff person, with you all the time? How many of you would love that? Most everybody I know would be like, hey, buddy, I need some space. I need you to give me some space. The other thing about that is that you're more likely to get more consistency out of a monitoring that's going on there. How many of you sometimes when you're working with people in service, let's not chase it that way. Let me talk about it this way. How many of you sometimes get very frustrated and irritated with the people that you love the most? You get in bad moods, right? Well, the monitoring materials are, I don't know if you give other monitoring, the remote supports and things like that. They don't really have mood swings, right? They don't really have to take a breath and be more patient. So if it's done well, and I really put that caveat on there, if we are looking at the best intentions, if we are going through human rights folks, if we're negotiating with people, if we're using this responsibly, it is far less intrusive than what we would see with just having a person with you all the time. The right to independence, and what we mean by independence, that's a very nebulous word. What we mean by that is I'm making more of my own, and HCBS means by that is I'm making more of my own decisions and I'm needing less help from other people. The very two things that enabling technology is designed to help people do. So there's an opportunity here. I'll talk about that in a minute. You can choose services and supports, and those supports and the subparts of those. So make sure you're documenting well with that. I know you're doing all this anyway, but you're talking to your human rights folks because people have a right and they can choose the services and supports and how they want the services and supports delivered. They can go to other folks. By the way, this is a great advantage for you because you, as a enabling tech provider, may offer something, and money follows the person in Arkansas. I'm sure it follows it everywhere. That's going to be a great selling point. Not that you're in this for marketing, but boy, we really want to be a viable option for a lot of people. Hey, here's some things that we offer. And if I'm shopping for someone I care for, or my son, for example, then I'm going to look for those options that are out there. An admissions agreement, that probably need your admissions agreement, which is something like a contract that you're going to see there. You're going to want to make sure that you're documenting well what can be expected. The example they give in the video I'm going to show you in just a minute, I'm not going to go through all the video, but one of the examples they give with their admissions agreement for residential services is people having pets. Well, that same idea can constitute around the idea of the technology that you're going to be using in the home. Make sure that your admissions agreement or your residential contract or your lease, just a lease, if you want to think of it that way, clarifies that so that people have a really good understanding. We've talked about privacy at home, schedule and access to food. I can think of all kinds of technology that would help that. Right to visitors. That's a big deal. I have rights to people. People can come over and visit me. That's allowed, but that creates some concern. Technology could help with that a lot to provide some healthy support for someone, making sure who's going to be coming over. Is that safe? Do I know that person? Is this somebody that I trust? Hey, you know what? I'd like for you to also jump on this camera with me. I'm looking at the Ring doorbell, and I'd like for you to make sure that this is somebody I feel good about. All that support is an opportunity, not just a risk. I really want to stress that because I think enabling technology brings as much opportunity as it does for risk. And accessibility. I cannot think of a better way not only to think about opportunities for accessibility than with enabling technology. How many people are going to get to go, are going to be able to access public transportation now? Or maybe they're getting Uber or something like that because they've got the navigation apps. There's an app right now coming out. I'm talking to a guy. It's called Roll Mobility. And it tells you, this is so cool. It not only tells you if a location in the public is wheelchair accessible, but how accessible it is. Is it loud for people who have autism? Is it hectic? Is it quiet? Are you able to navigate the environment carefully? So all kinds of apps, all kinds of programs that are going to really help here. And that's really what I want to get to, is I want to get to this idea that this is not, there are risks. Let's stay ahead of those with human rights folks, but there are also tons of opportunity. Now, I'm not going to go through these videos. I'm going to drop this link in the chat, but I want you to see something here that I think is really cool. If you are not familiar with the 10 requirements of the final rule, a group out in California, now the guy that put this together, his son has disabilities. He's part of a Hollywood production company. His son has disabilities, and he put together this at the request of one of the regional offices out there. I want to make sure that you see this here. Now, I'm going to drop this link in the chat, but this is a narrated sort of animated series that's actually enjoyable to watch. And it just really covers in a narrative form what each part of the final rule looks like with those 10 questions. I'm going to drop this in the chat here. I'm not going to spend any time going through that, but you see all the requirements that I just went through, forgive me there, all the requirements that I just went through here. And you have these little 5-minute videos that illustrate and explain what that looks like. It's an outstanding series. It gets a lot of good feedback. So let me just highlight this here. This will take me just a second. Do a little bit of I can't talk and do technology at the same time. Anybody else with me on that? You have to do one or the other. All right. I just put that link in the chat. Don't look at it now. I'll get my feelings hurt. Don't do that now. But what I want you to do, though, is look at that a little bit later, because it does give you, and again, many of you may be fully aware of this, but I found this to be extremely helpful in trying to understand, what are these requirements? What is the expectation? I've kind of mentioned this already. I got a little ahead of myself, so this slide won't take very long. What I want to encourage you to think about risk and opportunities. I think that you want to become familiar with each requirement. You're the lead project person there. Your human rights folks should be aware of this, but don't always count on that. Make sure that you have some solid basic understanding. You have to be an expert. I think the complexities of the universe are sometimes more difficult, easier to understand than Medicaid. But become familiar with those things, and the animated series I've sent there will help you with that. I want to mention some opportunities, though, and I've mentioned this already. There's nothing, I just want to reemphasize this. Community access. Community access, as I mentioned a minute ago, I think enabling technology has the greatest path to getting to that expectation of the final rule around community access, accessibility in your community, setting, all of that. Greater independence. I need less help from other people to do things. Don't just think about those big stories or those big examples where someone's living in their home and they only get remote support. Think about that guy who uses a wheelchair, who needs a lot of support to do things, and now they can change the channel on their television with their voice. That doesn't seem like a big deal until you have to call somebody every time you want to change the channel on the television, without having to get somebody to do that. So think about those small examples for independents, visitors. What about the safety concerns that are going on there? If you're like me, I like to have visitors in my home, but I also want to be safe. This is true for a lot of people that we serve and support. This is an opportunity, and technology can help you with there. The admissions agreement also kind of like that lease where you're going to cover everything to make sure that they see this as a benefit. There are risks, and they primarily center around privacy violations at home or in the community, and then also around the settings choice, because people, and I've kind of talked about that already, because somebody, may be uncomfortable with, or may want to have limited remote supports, or maybe they want a motion sensor but not a camera, or maybe they want to do that. So you're going to want to negotiate with that person, and you're going to want to make sure your Human Rights Committee is involved in all of that, and that you really come up with a plan that everybody feels good about. If you don't come up with a plan that people don't feel good about, somebody's going to sabotage it. So you want to work on that. I think you're going to have a good idea of that anyway. All right, I'm talking fast because I know I want to finish and get on with other things. Here's the basic idea when you think about HCBS and what they're looking for. This is kind of a summary. HCBS wants people to be served with the least restrictive supports in the least restrictive environment possible. And I've mentioned this already, enabling tech, in my opinion, if it's done well, is far less restrictive than a human being standing around watching what I'm doing and things like that, or just being even with that. So let me chase this down a minute, because I had to tell you, I was in, this is a confession. I was doing this work about 4 years before I understood why they called it home and community based. Why we call it home and community based? I mean, I'd said that metaphor, that acronym a gazillion times. HCBS services, HCBS Final Rule, HCBS, and it didn't really hit me till I'd been working in the field about 4 years. Home and community based was not in opposition, but was counter to facility based. Facility based care is one mindset. Home and community based support is another mindset. And what we don't want to do, and generally speaking, we're talking about enabling technology or any services supports, but I think especially our attention needs to be on it with enabling technology. We need to lead the way in person-centeredness with enabling technology. What we don't want to do is we don't want to take the mindset or the skill sets of a facility-based care and just sort of transfer it into community-based support. Home and community-based support, it's a different mindset. It's a different way of thinking. So with that, I want to talk about that for a minute. Oh, before I do that, I got to come back. I'm going to come back to that section, but I can't leave this out. As you're watching those 10 videos, and again, they're 5 minutes each, just watch one a day. Not too hard to do, and they're entertaining. As you're watching those, you're going to come up with, say, well, I know somebody that, boy, that's not going to work for them. I'm working with this one person, and she has mental illness, and this is going to go awry. HCBS, and that's just one example. There could be a million different ways why you might need an exception. HCBS does allow exceptions to each of those requirements. Now, I got to give you some clarity here, or Shift's going to kill me. I am not offering you legal guidance on HCBS. All right. I got to be very, very clear about that. I'm going to give you a general understanding of what that looks like here in just a second. But you're going to encounter a situation to where you're looking at one of those 10 requirements, and you're going to see, you're going to have some real concerns about the health and safety risks that they might cause if they go, without some sort of support in place. I'm not giving you official guidance. Every provider is responsible for implementing exception protocols for HCBS compliance. That really is on the provider. It really is on your region. That's why you want to be closely in touch with your Human Rights Committee to make sure that you're doing that. I'm just giving you an overview, 30,000-foot view of how the exception process works. You have here, again, here's some more opportunities for training. This is where you can go to learn about person-centered service planning directly from HCBS. They offer direct training, and if I were, trying to learn more about it, that's where I would go with that. But here's the basic overview, 30,000-foot overview. If you're looking for an exception to any part of the final rule, even including anything that would include enabling technology. What HCBS wants, if you're looking for an exception, is they want documentation on why the exception is needed, but they're not going to stop there. They also want documentation. They want documentation on what has been tried, that doesn't require the exception. They want to know that you've tried other things before you go straight to the exception. And this is the one that I hear creates the most sort of anxiety for many of us who are in the service world and service industry. They want documentation on how and when the exception will be removed, because I think we often think, well, that exception is always going to be there. And it might be, but they at least want you to try to make a plan to get away from that. So those 3 requirements for the exception, that's pretty common understanding. That's a 30,000 view. It's not legal advice. But if you are looking at enabling technology and you are looking at exceptions, that's the process HCBS is going to want to follow. Make sure that you go back to their website if you need further direction and what would be considered, sort of counsel that legal might be a strong word, but official counsel from HCBS. Now, let me go back to this idea of, thinking about patient-centered care in a facility or something like a facility. Could be at home, but you're still having that approach to where the focus is on patient-centered care. And then what HCBS is primarily concerned with, which is home and community-based support, and those being different things. And I always hate to do this because I feel like I'm being sanctimonious and preachy. I don't mean to be, but I want to make sure that we understand this distinction, because this is kind of why it's called home and community-based services and support. And that is the idea of a patient versus a person. This is going to become very relevant for enabling technology in just a moment. Patient-centered care. And I got to get this off the bat because I can see people going, wait a minute, feeling a little bit, like I'm being critical of one or the other. I'm not. Neither one is bad. One is not better than the other. It just depends on where you're getting that service or where you're getting that support. The setting plays a lot to do with this. Patient-centered care. I'll ask it to you this way. If I were to ask a person on the street, I'll put it to you this way. If I were to ask a person on the street, where does a patient live? What would they probably say? Anybody want to jump in and answer that? Got a big group. It's hard to break the ice with that. I think most people would say, well, they live in a hospital or a facility. If I ask, where does a person live? They're going to say, oh, they live in their home or their community. That kind of idea. Because there's a different mindset that goes with one versus the other. So you look at patient-centered care. Now, this is the valuable point I really want to make. There's nothing wrong with person-centered support is not better than patient-centered care if you're in that setting. And I'll break that down in just a moment. Let me break these down, what I mean by each of them. Patient-centered care emphasizes what is important for a person, health, safety, things like that, but it doesn't ignore what's important to a person. I'm going to hold that thought because I'm going to come back to it in a minute. The focus on patient-centered care rightfully is on health, safety, discharging from the facility, things like that, recovery. That's the focus of that. Patient-centered care is clinical in nature. It's usually in a facility or a clinical setting. It can be at home, but usually there's a place set up in the home that feels very clinical, right? Power rests more with the clinician. When you're thinking about patient-centered care, the doctor's orders, right? We've heard that. That makes a lot of sense. But it's not exclusive. I can still have a lot to say about the medical care I'm getting. I still can intervene. I can still advocate for myself. It's not exclusive, but really that clinician's got a lot more control. This is what you want if you're in a facility. I'm going to say something that might make some of my friends and the persons in the world angry. Maybe not angry, but a little bit. It'll make them a little riled. I don't want patient-centered support when I'm in the hospital. I don't want the clinician to be worried about my favorite restaurants to go to. I don't want my clinicians to be worried about, somebody that I want to reach out to with an email or something like that. Now, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be concerned about those things that I value and important to me, but that's not their primary focus. I say that because I don't want anybody to get the impression that I'm saying that this is bad and this is good, because that's not true. It's the setting that you're in as to what type you need there. And I'm going to talk about why this really, really matters with enabling technology in just a moment. I'll come back to it. And then you get to person-centered support. Person-centered support emphasizes what is important to a person, but it never neglects what is important for a person. We're not going to neglect health and safety. We're not going to neglect those things, but we are going to put a lot of emphasis on the things that make life worth living. Seeing my friend, David, hanging out with my kids, having my favorite meal, all those things that we value, following my rituals and routines. Thanksgiving has cranberry sauce, or it's not Thanksgiving. It can be big, it can be small. The focus on person-centered support, we put a little, they're both important. They both value. We're looking for the balance there, but we give a lot of emphasis on what is important to a person without ignoring what is important for a person, like health and safety. The focus is not on caregiving. Up here in patient-centered care, the focus is on caregiving. In person-centered support, the focus is on support. And that means a meaningful life as defined by the person, which is why you want to do good discovery. Make sure that whatever enabling technology you're embracing gets people to something that they value. I think I've told this story way too many times, but there was a provider that I talked with right when I first started Shift, and he was telling me this story about how they had built smart kitchens for people who didn't like to cook. They spent a lot of money. So it has to be something that, think about that as defined by themselves. So that story we talked about, having that doorbell camera, how helpful. If some of you may not like having people over, you might want to use that doorbell camera to shoo them away. That's the way you define meaningful life as defined by yourself. And when you think about patient-centered care, really you're focusing on discharge a lot of the times. When you're thinking about person-centered support, it's ongoing, but you want that support to fade. And that's one of the great things about enabling technology. It offers the ability for those staff supports to fade so much more quickly than in any other way. So that's a real value of that. Patient-centered care is clinical in nature. Person-centered support is community life in nature. It's usually at home, work, social community setting. Power rests with the clinician in patient-centered care. Power rests more with the person. Again, that's not exclusive, though. That doesn't mean you have to be complicit with someone putting their life or other people's lives or their health or risk in danger. But I'm not suggesting that. But I am saying that the emphasis more is on what's important to a person. And the person, generally speaking, at least compared to the other, has a little bit more power. They have more control over life. If you don't have control over your life, then your life doesn't feel like it belongs to you. It feels like it belongs to someone else. That becomes especially relevant with enabling technology because it has the capacity to give people decision-making power back to their lives. And when they have decision-making power in their lives, they have more control over their own lives. They have that power that we're looking for here in person-centered support. This is what you want from your supporters, especially in your community. That doesn't mean that staff support aren't going to make sure I'm taking my meds. We need to do that. That doesn't mean that staff support aren't going to help me, encourage me to follow my diet. But I also hope that staff support are helping me keep in touch with the people that I love and care about. I also hope that they're helping me navigate using maybe some enabling technology to get some public transportation or an Uber or something else to go to my favorite bar on Thursday night for trivia. Those things that I value. That's what really excites me about enabling technology, is because I see how much more possible it makes for people to get here. I can tell you that in my own life, I don't want a clinician controlling the day-to-day things of my life. Can we all kind of agree with that? I think we can see the value in that. That doesn't mean I should ignore it. People who love me tell me, take your, don't forget your vitamins. For now, for me, it's your omegas, because, all that. I'm glad for that, but I don't want somebody controlling, especially the facets of my life. Support, and I mentioned this, support is not control, but I want to also think about this idea. Excuse me, this thing keeps going back. Enabling technology, for the most part, is not focused on caregiving. It's focused on support. Those are two kind of different things. Now I want to talk about this next section as I get ready to close this out, about language. And the first thing I want to tell you about language is be patient. Be patient with folks, because language is changing. It's evolving. It's used interchangeably. I would be happy if we never use the word independence again, because everybody means something different when they say it. And I spend more time explaining what I mean by independence than if I would just say needs less help to do things. Autonomy is that other word that we talk about a lot. They have more autonomy. There's 10 different ways people interpret that. The language is changing. What I would prefer to say is I make more of my own decisions. but be patient with people with language. Be patient and encouraging with that, because what you don't want to become is that sort of school marm about language. But that being said, language matters. I'm going to give you an example towards the end here. First off, language, and the language that we use recognizes a person, but it doesn't define, it recognizes their disability, but it doesn't define a person by their disability. How many of you would say the first thing you know about a person often, person that comes into services at your organization, one of the first things that you know about that person is their diagnosis of their behavior? You know their diagnosis and their behavior before you know their favorite food, don't you? Before you know that they're a great singer, before you know who they value in their life and who they appreciate and who they want to be with. And all of this is related to enabling technology, because the goal for me and I'm passionate about this, is enabling technology sort of shifts the narrative on that, so that we do get to know what somebody really values, what we love them and like about them. And we see the quickest way for them not to be defined by their disability, but by how enabling technology really bridges the gap, so that we are getting to know them before we get to know their diagnosis or their disability. Language matters. It shapes the narrative of the person to themselves and to other people in the community. Are they primarily known for their diagnosis and behavior? Watch out for Megan. She's going to throw something at you. Let me tell you about Megan. She is a great singer, and she loves her friends, and her family is really important to her, especially her brother. Now, Megan, I don't know your situation, but right. And not only does that happen in the broader community, but if we're not careful, that language will begin. Well, I'll put it to you this way. I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and I was talking to a young woman, really neat, really bright, happy, wonderful personality. Being at that conference was important to her. There was karaoke that was coming up that night. That was very important to her. She had some disabilities, and she introduced herself and said, "I'm going to make up a name here." She said, "Hi, I'm Jill, and I'm high functioning." And I thought how she had began to sort of absorb all of that system speak onto herself. And that was one of the preeminent things that she, now again, identity first language means that people with disabilities can refer to themselves any way they want. Somebody says, I have autism, or I'm autistic. You don't argue with them. That's their people. People can say however they want about themselves. But for me, I'm going to default to something that's more respectful, something that speaks to that. I'm going to come back to why this is enabling technology connected to this in just a moment. It defines the nature of the relationship, and I can't overstate this one. Language matters because it defines the nature of the relationship between staff or others and the person or the people that they support. Power over language. And this is where people get a little bit prickly. I want to be careful. I want to be thoughtful. I'm not being judgmental. But we use language like patient, client, monitor. How many of you want to be monitored? Right. How many of you want to be supervised? Monitor. Or escalating behavior. Brad, do you have escalating behavior, or do you sometimes get angry and raise your voice? I don't know you, Brad. I don't know whether you raise your voice or not, but
never, right?
Yeah, but we don't call it escalating behavior, do we? Brad had an escalating behavior today. Brad, he got mad and he raised his voice. Or an outing, and this is a fun one to me. How many of you? That sounds terrible. We're going to go on an outing. Oh my gosh, what's going to happen to somebody on an outing? That's a phrase. How many of you use that language with your significant other? Hey, hon, how's your day going? Let's say you and I go on an outing tonight. I'll provide transport. All that language comes in, and you know what it says? It says I'm in control. And in a facility or in a patient-centered approach, which is great, where it's appropriate, where it's right, that's entirely cool. But in a community-based setting, in a home and community-based setting, it's this shared responsibility. Some better language, and I don't want this to caught up. The thing about language, everybody says, well, what do we say then? It's always changing. It's always growing. If you sound like you're that person's clinician and you're not, you're probably not using that kind of language we're talking about there. If you wouldn't use this language the way you talk with your family and friends, you're probably not using that person's language. And the final way, if you're speaking in such a way that communicates I'm in control, probably not that respectful person-centered language. I'm going to give you an example of that in a minute. But this is power with language. And that's what person-centered is about. It's not that we're giving all the control to the other person. That's not responsible. but it's this power with language, the person I work with, not the patient or client. Right now, and this changes every few years, we're trying to figure it out. Okay. I just like, for me, as a person I work with, or if I can, I use their names. Got a great story about that. I won't have time for it now, but somebody, I said, what do you want us to call you? He said, my name is Tom, which was perfect. It was a perfect answer. Remote support instead of monitoring and supervising, instead of escalating behavior, raises his voice or even screams at others. By the way, I don't know what escalating behavior means. If you're trying to help me take care of Brad and you say his escalating behavior, I don't know what that means. Watch out. If you mess with his stuff, he's going to yell at you. That actually helps me. That actually lets me know what I've got to do there. Or instead of going an outing, where are you going? Because if I'm going out with Kim tomorrow night, she and I are going to the movies. We're not going on an outing. All that system language communicates is I'm in control. And power with language, person-centered language, is shared control, power with. Let me give you an example of why that language doesn't work. Years ago, I was married to my kid's mom. And I was going through some counseling courses in grad school. And she got very angry about something. And I had been through some counseling courses. Do you see where this is going? Any of you see where this is going? Amy, you know where it's going? And I said to her, you seem quite agitated. What can I do to de-escalate the situation? She gave me a very, very clear, not easy to misunderstand approach as to what I can do to de-escalate the situation. You know why that made her mad? And why you're all laughing about it now, and why it is funny when I look back on it? Because, apart from being a bloviating, pompous, whatever, what I was communicating to her was that I was in control. You seem very agitated. I, on the other hand, am calm, cool, and collective. What can I do to help the situation? I have a plan, and if you'll just fall in line with my plan, everything will be fine. I was communicating to her that I was in control. This language matters because enabling technology and person-centered practices, which go hand in hand, are about sharing control and responsibility so that people have more positive control over their own lives. I'm going to tell you two people. You tell me who you think needs care and who you think needs support. Marcus is autistic, toilets and feeds independently, but needs supervision or video monitoring by a caregiver. That's Marcus. Harold is a great breakdancer. He loves old school rap and Marvel movies. He has autism, and often he needs someone nearby, but sometimes does really well with remote support. Marcus needs what? Caregiving. Harold needs what? Support. What I didn't tell you was that Marcus and Harold, that's not their real names, and they're the same person. It was simply the way I described them. I begin with a diagnosis. I begin with issues related to behavior, and then I begin with support, and then I talk about support. Here I get to know what we love about him, what is important to him, and now we're not going to neglect this. We never neglect it, but now I'm going to talk about this and how that support can be beneficial. In your language, you want to communicate this power with. Now, I want to stop here and chase a rabbit for a moment. And I promise, Paul, I'm almost done. When you are working with vendors, please remember that they live in both of these worlds. So I say that because they're going to use this language interchangeably. And on one hand, I want you to be conscious of it. Don't turn into the correct, though. Don't turn into the person-centered language Nazi. Nobody wants that. But what you can do is sort of repeat back what we're saying. So what I hear you saying is you're working with a person who needs remote support because they sometimes get angry when people mess with their stuff, instead of the language that I used a little bit a minute ago. I say that to be patient, and I also want to encourage you to do that, to make sure to do your best to try to deal with this language. Now, again, I'm not going to give you a lexicon of things you can say and can't say. That's dumb, and it'll change next week anyway. Language is always changing, growing, and evolving. So you want to keep that in mind there. Now, let me close this out with talking about person-centered practices and the connection between enabling technology, and why this matters, and why it is important that we talk about enabling technology, that we do have that mindset of person-centered support, unless they're in a facility or unless there is something that is highly clinical in nature. It's kind of gray. I got to acknowledge that. But typically for most people, they're getting supports in their home and the community. It needs to be person-centered support as opposed to facility-based patient-centered care. And that's going to especially reflect in enabling technology. Here's why. And this is why I want you to get excited about it, and why I want to motivate you to get busy, not just with education and accreditation, but with making this happen for people that you're working with, people that you're supporting, people that you provide services to. There are two primary person-centered outcomes that I constantly was working on when I was in that world primarily. And the one was less dependency on others for people, and they make more of their own decisions. There's more than that, but those were two huge ones that I always found myself working on. And why I love enabling technology and why I want to just motivate and cheer you on to do it is enabling technologies is described primarily as doing two things: less dependency on others, more decision-making power. Enabling technology requires a person-centered foundation because enabling technology is at its heart a person-centered practice. So I went well beyond privacy and well beyond human rights. Make sure you're thoughtful with that, but adopt that narrative, that attitude. I'm going to help someone have more control over their life. They're going to need less help from other people. They're going to make more of their own decisions. I'm going to use language that reflects that. And I'm going to have the mindset of I'm serving someone, I'm supporting someone in the community, not caregiving for someone in a facility. And of course, there's some nuance there. I trust all of you all will figure that out. Thank you for letting me share with you today. Paul, thank you, and others for hearing me out. I do hope that that was somewhat, I hope that you're encouraged with that, that, you know, that we're looking to those best practices. Thanks so much.
Patrick, thank you. Excellent amount of information, so on topic and on point for what a lot of the folks attending this call are thinking about as we kind of progress through this pilot project. So this was fantastic.
Thank you.
I want to just quickly share what we have coming up. I won't share my screen. I'll just read it out to you. So next week, Thursday, the speaker series is going to feature Rick Anderson from ICAN Arkansas, ICAN Arkansas. So they're an organization that provides, he'll tell you about it in depth, but they are essentially a technology lending service. And it gives you the opportunity, or more so your individuals, the opportunity to kind of try out technology before they commit to it. And he'll tell you all about their library and how that works. They also have a reuse program. So looking forward to that presentation next Thursday. The 29th, we're still open on what the topic's going to be. So we'll get it lined up. We just need to dot some I's and cross some T's on that. All right, so now pivoting over. So we have Caitlin Daigle from AngelSense here today, and this is our vendor spotlight section. So Caitlin, I want to bring you on, and you got the rest of the time to tell everybody about your outstanding service.
Awesome. Can you guys see my screen right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so I just want to talk really quickly about how the lives of special needs individuals can really be positively impacted by using AngelSense assistive technology to cope with and overcome challenges when it comes to safety. And Patrick, don't fault me, I'm going to use the word independence and autonomy throughout, but I loved your presentation. It was very helpful because there's a lot of questions that I get with technology. So I am Caitlin Daigle. I work for AngelSense. My goals are to discover partnerships that we can help to make individuals with disabilities, need an aging population, access assistive technology through different funding sources. So with that, what is AngelSense? It's an advanced assistive technology that really provides maximum safety and greater independence for our most vulnerable loved ones with autism, special needs, and dementia. So it includes a wearable GPS device with an assistive speakerphone, a user-friendly app for multiple caregivers, whether that's parent, family members, teachers, remote supports, therapists, even law enforcement. And all of our user support is by special needs parents. So next, this is basically what we build our pillars with. I'm sure you're all very familiar with the common challenges in the community. So we have these three pillars to address these challenges. Each pillar is really a foundation of the next one. The first one is safety. We need to help cope with the relevant daily safety concerns, whether that's elopement, transportation, caregiving, anything like that. As soon as you can ensure that an individual is safe, then we can really start to focus on skill building and remote support. So caregivers can have proactive notifications to know which support is needed, and then they have a set of tools to be able to act upon it. These two first pillars really enable the practice of new skills that truly can lead an individual to independence. And it looks different for every single person, and we completely understand that. So with that, I'm going to share another tab. Please let me know if you can hear the sound, or if you don't hear the sound.
AngelSense is an assistive technology designed to ensure maximum safety, effective remote support, and greater independence for individuals with special needs. It includes an AI-powered monitoring and alerting system, an app for multiple caregivers, and a wearable device with an assistive speakerphone and SOS button. Additionally, the AngelSense service offers premium customer care that is entirely staffed by special needs moms who use AngelSense with their own children. When you call, we understand. Proven to prevent emergencies related to elopement or transportation and other safety incidents. With AngelSense, children can experience a less restrictive environment and participate in independent activities that might otherwise pose a safety risk. AngelSense was designed to give parents peace of mind with unique features like proactive alerts, all-day, real-time GPS tracking, emergency search and rescue tools, an auto-pickup speakerphone, and a call request capability. Whether the app is open or not, AngelSense keeps parents informed about their child's location in transits, with alerts for arrivals, departures, pickups, drop-offs, and transit movements, and also notifies about unfamiliar or unexpected places. If a notification raises concerns, parents can open the app to see their child's real-time location and route on a map. The parent can then call the child's device's auto-pickup speakerphone to immediately speak with their child or anyone in their surroundings, and this way provide support, guidance, or even prevent emergencies from escalating into dangerous situations. If additional help is needed, at a click of a button, parents can share the child's live location with law enforcement, neighbors, family members, and anyone else that may assist. If the child is hiding or lost in a crowd, an alarm on the device can be triggered and easily be heard. If the child needs help or support, they can press the SOS button on their device to initiate a call. AngelSense is also a tool for skill building and promoting independence. AngelSense ensures safety and enables efficient remote support, empowering thousands of special needs children to take the bus to school, engage in field trips, visit friends' houses, ride bikes around the neighborhood, and achieve numerous milestones their parents never imagined possible. And as a child grows up and begins wanting more and more freedom, the ability to provide effective remote support through the auto-pickup speakerphone and asking for help when needed by pressing the SOS button help them realize their goals. Whether it's going to college or vocational school, getting a job or volunteering, or even living on their own or in an independent living facility, so many parents claim that AngelSense is the reason their children are able to be a part of the community and experience a quality of life they had never even imagined would exist for them. And the independent skills learned positively affect their long-term well-being, leading them to achieve a higher level of confidence and ultimately a better quality of life.
So you have some testimonials on that page, but in sake of time, I'll save it. I could talk about this all day long. There's so many different features and tools. It's customizable for each individual that is using it. So this really hits home for a lot of individuals. I know that video focuses a lot on children and as they age, but really it's a good fit for anybody, even those that are elderly and that want to age in place and be able to stay at home and not have to go to a facility. So this is what we call the vicious cycle of safety concerns. You have a safety concern, whether that's transportation, elopement, wandering, a change in schedule, anything like that, even medication. We have voice reminders, all sorts of different stuff. the anxiety of the caregiver is naturally going to go up because you're worried about the individual, because you care about them. And then, to no fault of their own, they're going to start to restrict the environment and avoid activities because they want to keep them safe. And then, so then what we see is really a more dependent individual overall, more maladaptive behaviors because they have limited community engagement, increased developmental delays, and you just created a really more independent individual that we want to break this cycle. So what we do is allow individuals to practice activities independently, facilitate their confidence, their autonomy, and increase the quality of life, not only for them, but for everybody else around them. Now, I just did a presentation last night. I asked them to send me the video. I had two of my colleagues who are actually parents who use the device. And it's about 4 minutes, and I just want to share it real quick with you guys because then I think it means a lot more when it comes to somebody who uses it. Of course, I use it. I travel across the country, but it's not the same. Oh boy. If it'll load. Sorry. All right, never mind. We're going to shift gears. If I can share that later, we'll do that. So we do have all sorts of different wearables, sensory friendly, of course. It just depends on what's right for the individual. There is no one size fits all. So we have a pendant looking device, which is on the top right here. And then we also have the watch looking device. So a lot of adolescents and elderly like this device. I prefer this device because.
Caitlin, just real quick, can you switch back to the previous screen? You're still on the Zoom screen.
Sorry.
You got
There
it.
we go. So yeah, this is the pendant looking device. This is some of our wearing options. We are constantly coming out with more. And then this is the watch looking device. So adolescents and elderly really like this because it doesn't look like you're wearing something different, but also it doesn't have crazy functionality like an Apple Watch or anything like that, where, you know, somebody's on games or has a whole access of list and then can't operate it. We try to keep it really, really simple. They have the SOS buttons to be able to request calls if they ever want help. We have voice memos that can play. And then I prefer this device. I don't like watches. I don't wear jewelry. It's rare, very, very rare if I do. It's usually when I'm at a conference or something. It's very minimal. So I like this device because you can actually wear it very discreetly in this fabric pouch. It works the same way as those anti-theft devices in stores. You basically take the pin and secure it, and it can go on any type of fabric. So whether it's inside someone's pants pocket, along the waistband, I put it in my cardigan sweater, I can pin it on the inside of a dress. Nobody really knows it's there, but it's an extra level of security because the amount of times I lose my phone a day is actually quite embarrassing. So at least I have that backup. So I'm going to try my best to describe their stories. So Caden, this is my friend Melissa. She has been using AngelSense since he was about 3 years old. And he was accidentally put on the wrong bus, nonverbal, and severely autistic. So it took hours for her to locate him. He couldn't speak up for himself. And then she was not able to find him. So after that episode, they immediately got AngelSense, tried it out. Now Caden is, I think he just turned 10. And he is thriving. He is verbal now. She was always told that he was going to have to rely on her for the rest of his life. He is very independent, a sweet, sweet kid. And it really gives her the peace of mind to know that he's safe while he's doing things on his own. So he's even, I think, last Friday we had a meeting and she had to cancel it on me because, oh, actually, no, it's tomorrow. I'm going to be at a tech summit. And she's like, I'm sorry, I can't go. Caden's actually going to be taking a plane by himself. And I was like, okay. I was like, you be available if you need to. I don't want you to be worrying about it. And so she is also a BCBA. So we work with what we call AngelSense learning to help individuals be able to adapt the device and use it for each person's needs and what they want and what they see fit. Now, this is Tammy and Morgan. They're in Tennessee. This is Tammy and this is Morgan. So she knows that she's not going to be around forever. and she really wants to make sure that Morgan has a voice and she can do things more independently for herself, because mom was making visual charts and doing everything for Morgan. So we got her Angel Sense, and we've been working with Angel Sense Learning. Morgan just turned 30 not too long ago. So we got to ensure her safety so that way she gets to be able to test out the waters. So she's capable. She knows Morgan's capable of these things, but safety is always a huge concern. So it really gives her the peace of mind to be able to let Morgan try things out. So they've gone grocery shopping. She can send her a couple aisles away and she can go pick out the things that she wants. And then she comes right back to the cart. And if she ever needs help, she knows how to push the button, or Tammy can call her and she can also just look at her phone and know where she is. Tammy wanted to go for a walk. Could you imagine not going for a walk by yourself in 30 years? So Morgan didn't want to go, and we had been in this process for about 4 months. And Tammy said, okay, Morgan, are you okay staying at home? And she goes, yep, I'll be right here. And she was sitting on the couch, and she knew that Morgan had the tools that she needed, and she got to take a walk by herself around the block. Morgan now makes her food independently, sandwiches and stuff like that. She knows how to request help. She used to get really frustrated when she had to make decisions. So now she knows that she can just press a button and she knows mom's going to be right there, or whoever she decides that she wants on the device, dad, sister, anybody like that. And then just running errands, going to the post office, all sorts of stuff. She's growing every single day, and it is amazing to watch. So that is my quick synopsis. I can absolutely share resources. If any of you guys would like it, I would welcome the opportunity to do a full demo. I can show you the products on screen. I'm hoping to be at the conference. I just have to get a few things approved first, and then I'll have everything out there. And I look forward to hopefully working with all of you.
Excellent. Thanks, Caitlin. Really appreciate it. I will make sure I send out your contact information as a follow-up. Patrick, I'm also going to send out the link to the HCBS videos that you highlighted in the chat for folks who might not have been on the call. But thank you both for taking the time today to share this information with us, and we look forward to some follow-up questions for you, Caitlin, no doubt. Patrick, you'll probably get some as well. So,
Happy to
all
help.
right, everybody. Thank you. Until next Thursday, we'll be talking with you.
Bye.
Thanks.